start our committee. The second new petition is PE 1439 by Jonathan McCall on betting and loan shops in deprived communities. Members have a note by the clerk, the spice briefing and the petition. Could I welcome our witnesses today? Councillor Jonathan McCall from Western Berkshire Council and Murdoch Cameron from the Chairman of Block and Haldane Community Council. You're very welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming along. I think Gil Patterson was also interested in attending, but I don't think we got him so far. Could I invite Councillor McCall to make a short presentation of around 5 minutes, then I'll kick off with a question and my colleagues will follow up. Councillor McCall.
Thank you very much, Convener. Just before I begin, first of all, Gil Patterson was hoping to come along, but I understand there's another committee meeting at the same time which is discussing the budget, so if it finishes early, he may appear. I also want to make clear before I begin, I'm not here representing Western Berkshire Council, although I am a member of Western Berkshire Council. It was a petition that I submitted on my own, so just to make that perfectly clear. So, Mr Chairman, elected members, thank you very, very much for giving me this opportunity to raise this issue at Parliamentary Committee. I'd also like to record my thanks to your clerking team, and in particular Mr Chris Hind, who's been extremely helpful and has kept me informed at every stage. As per the guidance I've received, I'll try not to stray into commentary on details already before you in writing. I've raised this issue because I believe that we need to stop the proliferation of betting and high-interest loan shops in deprived communities across Scotland. As you already know, I've got support from individuals and groups from the rest of the UK. That's in your briefing, and I have support me here today, Mr Murdoch Cameron from Balloch Community Council. He is also the convener of Western Berkshire Community Council's forum, which represents all the community councils in the area. It's my firm belief that betting and high-interest loan shops are targeting deprived areas, taking advantage of low rents caused by the current economic situation and saturating our town centres. It's important to note that I'm not asking this committee to seek a change in legislation at this time. I understand how the system works, and if we are to come up with a fit-for-purpose solution, we will need robust evidence of a link between the number of these premises and levels of deprivation, along with evidence of a link between fixed odds betting terminals, which we'll speak about more, and problem gambling, coupled with statistical evidence for individual communities. Research done in England and Wales by GeoFutures and the National Centre for Social Research on behalf of Channel 4 Dispatches shows that in affluent areas with low unemployment, there are only 5 betting offices per 100,000 population. Contrast that with 12 per 100,000 population in areas of high unemployment. But the real issue, as I've alluded to, is the relationship between so-called fixed odds betting terminals and problem gambling, which has an adverse effect on whole families, communities and the wider local economy. In Dumbarton, as well as other operators, there are 2 bookmakers from the same company, a stone's throw from each other. As I understand it, this is because legislation means they're only permitted to have 4 of these fixed odds betting terminals in any one shop. Therefore, they open 2 shops in order to double their income. Gambling Commission stats from April 2008 to March 2011 calculate that in the UK, around £1.2 billion was lost by people on these machines alone, on which it's possible to gamble £18,000 every hour on a single machine because of the way the timing is set up on them. Further research by Professor Jim Orford of Birmingham University has estimated that in the same period, people with a gambling addiction in the UK lost around £57 million on horse racing, £75 million betting on dog racing, £75 million in casinos, but a staggering £297 million on fixed odds betting machines. And this is where the problem is, in my opinion. I have to say, as a councillor, it's been extremely frustrating over the past 5 years, with planning committees refusing permission for these premises, only to have that quashed on appeal. I feel we need the powers to help our communities improve and flourish. I'm not anti-gambling, but if we are concerned and can regulate the number of alcohol licensed premises with an over-provision policy in order to help protect those with an alcohol addiction with the right evidential and statistical basis, I don't see why we couldn't regulate gambling in the same way. I'm also not anti-payday loan. I think the interest charges are ridiculous, and there are serious concerns about how these operations treat people who have trouble paying their loans back on time. But I also know that, used responsibly and carefully, These places do provide a service to people in an emergency situation, albeit I do advise my own constituents to join a local credit union as a better alternative. Bookmakers will tell you that there are procedures in place to protect people with problems, and that in extreme cases they can intervene and stop people playing the machines, but with the best will in the world there is absolutely nothing they can do if the customer, caught in a downward spiral of addiction, simply moves to one of the many other local betting premises on the same street that haven't seen him in a while. I'm fortunate that I've never had an addiction, and as such I cannot possibly fully understand what sufferers go through. But what I do know is that people with an addiction, such as problem gambling, think differently. They don't reason in the same way that the rest of us do, and running out of cash is often not enough to stop them, and this is where the payday loan shops come in. What's to stop people from popping next door to the payday loan shop, getting £200, which is a normal poor credit limit, and then losing it in less than a minute on one of these machines? Interest charges and late payment fees aside, you might not think it a serious issue to be losing an extra £200, but what if there are 3 or 4 payday loan shops in the one area, with fixed odds bet machines eating up to £300 a minute? That's a potential £800 lost in less than 3 minutes, with an average of £25 interest for every £100 borrowed from these lenders. You're talking about someone increasing potentially their debt by £1,000, or more, depending on the number of payday loan shops in the local area. This is a serious issue, and I strongly believe that the Scottish Government needs to take a serious look at it. And the last thing I'll say is I had a quick look at your spice briefing that the clerking team had prepared, and it notes that obviously gambling is a reserved matter. I'm aware of that, and that's why I'm not seeking anything on the gambling legislation. I think this can be dealt with by the Scottish Parliament through an over-provision policy with planning. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCall. It was very helpful. And just to say to Mr Cameron, if you want to come in at any stage, just please indicate, and be very happy to take any questions or points that you have.
Yes, Convener.
Sorry, it wasn't an invite to give another 5-minute speech, but very, very free to come in at any other time later on in this event. Could I just say this, at the start, Councillor McCall, do you feel that the current planning provisions do give any controls, or are you looking for more powers on planning? Because I understand from the Scottish Government that there is Article 4 directions that gives power to local authorities to control certain issues such as betting shops by removing permitted development rights. So the UK Government line is there actually is power and control there. But are you saying, yes, it's there, but it's not being used well enough? Or are you saying that your petition would really want more powers for planning to give you more clout over the issues that you're raising in your petition?
In practice, Mr Chairman, it doesn't work. What our own planning officers tell us is that there are no grounds on which we can refuse, and when you do refuse permission, it is overturned on appeal to the Scottish Government because there are no robust grounds on which to refuse. And what I'm seeking is a similar situation to what they have with alcohol licensing, whereby if you've got the proper statistical evidence, you can refuse on the grounds of over-provision, because the current legislation doesn't give us enough flexibility.
So that's obviously subject to appeal as well, if I recall from my past days in licensing board. Right, thank you very much for that. Can I start with Chick Brodie?
Good morning. Wondering, Mr McCall, if you can give some indication in terms of the profile now of betting, because a lot of betting is now done on the internet. I mean, how do we achieve what your petition seeks to achieve if that movement seems to be accelerating? Is that not the case? I mean, how would you address that?
I absolutely agree with you, Mr Brodie. Online gambling is increasing, but unfortunately gambling is a reserved matter, so there isn't anything that the Scottish Parliament can do. What I've got to look at here in coming to yourselves is I've got to work within the constraints of the powers that the Scottish Parliament have, and I do feel that changes to the planning legislation could make a significant difference to people's lives in our communities. Many of the people that we're talking about here that have these problems don't have internet access, for example, so it's not as easy for them to access that type of gambling. I know it's only a small thing that I'm suggesting for, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Just I mean, just on the payday loan thing, which is, after hearing the R3 customer survey this morning, is a major blight on what's happening economically. Do you think there should be more control in terms of linking and registering companies, payday loan shops, as they have in Australia and now have in some of the states in America, where they all have to register, and there is a database where people are checked how much they're actually being loaned? Is that something that you think might be feasible?
Well, I wasn't actually aware of that. It certainly sounds like a very sensible approach it's been taking elsewhere, and I'm sure it is something that the Parliament and the Government will be looking at. It really is a very, very serious problem. But as I say, I'm sort of, with this petition, I'm sticking strictly to the issue of problem gambling and the links between access to these sort of payday loan shops and their proximity to many gambling premises.
I just want to check a company called Veritech, who have issued the software in Australia and the States.
Thank you.
Other members wish to come in? Amit Taggart.
Convener, and welcome to Scottish Parliament, and thank you very much for your petition. We had a debate quite recently within the Chamber, I'm sure it was by John Mason, that we looked at exactly what you've described here in your petition. I think it's important that we do refer back to the Scottish Government and also the UK Government to look at them, to ask them to look at their planning laws to try and eradicate, because I mean I think we're finding it more and more frequent that in areas, well most certainly areas of Glasgow as well, that there's a betting shop next to the payday loan shop, and you know there's loads of them even in such a small confined area, and it's quite frightening. But also we have, both myself and John Wilson are on the credit union cross-party group, but we have in the past asked for investment in credit unions to try and assist communities to go down another route as opposed to tackling the payday loan sharks. And
views on that?
Absolutely, I would wholeheartedly agree. And you know, contacting the UK Government is a positive step as well as is in the paperwork in front of you. This was actually born out of discussions that I had online with Councillor Rowena Davis, who represents the constituency of Peckham in London, and also she got involved with a group called Gambling Reform and Society Perception, which is a group that deals with problem gambling issues, lobbying, such like. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Could I perhaps bring Mr Cameron now? Mr Cameron, what's your views on the petition?
Well, Convener, very briefly, I obviously concur with Councillor McCall. I represent 10 community councils, and we have discussed this, and there's no doubt about it, these premises cause great misery to members of the community. First of all, the FOB machines, or terminals as they're called, according to the police, they're one of the main reasons for violence in these sort of premises. And if I may say that I know the high streets are going through difficult times, the businesses are failing, etc., etc. But every time there seems to be a vacancy in a premises, it's filled by one of those sort of businesses, which unfortunately inflicts more misery to the people. Now, I happen to know from personal reasons, which I won't obviously go into in detail, that these loan shark shops are really a terrible thing. Before you know where you are, you're hundreds and hundreds of pounds in debt. And it is a very difficult thing to address, how you could control it. And this is where I think Mr Brodie's suggestion, and maybe one way. Gambling, as we all know, because you're all experienced people, has been with us since time immemorial, since the Egyptians right through the road, etc., etc. It's nothing new, but it's on the increase, it's on our television, it's on the internet, it's everywhere. And more people are being dragged into this, and it really means misery and debt for many, many people.
I think Councillor McCall made a good point about, you know, there is some planning controls, but if the council rules against it and then it goes to appeal, then the council are impotent in that. But the analogy from licensing is if there's an element about over-provision going into that, would you feel that would be quite useful? That would obviously be something the UK government would have to
Yes, yeah. If we go back to the times when we had the shipyards and the steel works and the workers flowed out and went into the pub, etc., etc., to a certain extent, we still have too many pubs. We have licensed shops at nearly every corner. There ought to be more control to sort of get rid of some of these and put a sort of control on some of the licenses that we do provide these premises with.
I think the petition is very clear what it's calling from to the Scottish Government, and I understand that the Scottish Government's currently consulting on the National Planning Framework 3 anyway, so this is perhaps a good time for us to refer this petition to them to get their views. So that would be, I think, a very sensible way forward. Do other members who have not been in wish to contribute? Angus MacDonald.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I've certainly got a lot of sympathy for this petition, and I can relate to the points raised as a former local councillor. I was particularly interested to hear how betting shops can get round the fixed odds betting machines limits by opening another shop next door, which is a concern and one I hadn't picked up on in the past. Also, as a former councillor, I'm aware of the frustrations with regard to planning applications being refused by the planning committee and then being approved on appeal, particularly in cases where you have payday loan shops and betting shops. Another issue which has concerned me for some time, and Chick Brodie touched on, is the proliferation of online casino adverts on TV, which is another issue that maybe for discussion on another day. But it's clearly having an impact on families in deprived communities. I know that the Economy and Energy Minister, Fergus Ewing, has made representation to the UK Government. He actually mentioned that in the Chamber in response to a question some time ago on payday loan companies. So I know that the Government have been certainly aware of the issue. But it may be worth asking the Local Government Minister, in addition to the Scottish Government, specifically respond to the petition, given that it is such an issue.
Most definitely. Does any other member wish to come in? Do other witnesses wish to add anything in addition?
No, I would really just like to thank the committee for taking on board my concerns and trying to find a way forward with it.
Sure. Well, if you could just stay with us for a few seconds, because we're looking at the next stage. But certainly my view is that we should certainly continue this petition. I think there's a lot of merit in it, particularly at a time when the Scottish Government is already consulting on planning, as I said, on the National Planning Framework. The clerk's laid out a series of action points in action point 1. I would certainly suggest we go down that road. That includes the Gambling Commission, the Office of Fair Trading and the Association of British Bookmakers, which would ask these various bodies what their views are on the petition. Are members agreeable to that way forward?
Yep.
John Wilson?
On board Anne McTaggart's point about right to the UK Government about this petition as well, just so that we get a view from the UK Government, because clearly the issues about Gambling Act and the payday loan companies, and like Mr Cameron's description of the loan shark shops in their high street, if only they were classified as loan sharks, we wouldn't have as many of them in our high streets, but the rates are clearly charging a lot higher than loan sharks. But if we could write to the UK Government, because it is their legislation in the main they were actually dealing with in terms of the Gambling Act and the Financial Services Authority as well.
Go. Check, Brodie.
Just very quickly, I don't know if you've checked, Mr McCall, and I certainly haven't, but do you think the ownership of the bookmakers and the payday loans might be the same, one and the same, in some cases?
I have absolutely no idea, and when it's a verbatim minute, I wouldn't like to speculate. But it's certainly worth checking, yes.
Jackson Carroll?
Can I also agree with you, Convener? Can I, just to prove I'm not curmudgeonly about all the time, say that I actually thought that was one of the best, most focused presentations I've heard so far on the Petitions Committee, with a very measured and sensible approach, and I'm very happy to take forward the recommendation that my silence, reticence to enter into questions should not be taken as having been disinterested or unimpressed.
And could I say that praise from Jackson Carlow is praise indeed. So thank you very much for coming along. And thank you again for your evidence. I think all the committees enjoyed it. It's a very good petition. And I'll suspend for 1 minute to allow our witnesses to leave. Thank you both again, gentlemen.
Thank you.